All right, here's where we differ because I am buying when there is blood in the street on Mike Williams.
You're listening to Let's Talk Fantasy Football, where men of fantasy genius have realized, hey guys, we don't need real football skills to dominate on the fantasy field. Yeah. So slap on your pads and grab your helmet. Shit's about to get real.
Welcome back, everybody, to another edition of Let's Talk Fantasy Football. I am your host tonight. My name is Nick Walsh, and I am here, I think, maybe for the first time as host with this certain person as guest, because I am here with fearless leader Nick Schreck. Schreck, how are we doing?
Walsh, I'm doing great, man. And yeah, it is weird to be on the flip side here of the podcast with you, but I'm excited, man. I'm excited. You and Vinny have been crushing the podcast, and we're talking Raiders, man. I mean, does it get better than that for you?
No, it really doesn't, and that's why I'm taking the hosting duties over, so I can just run roughshod on the Raiders tonight. But we'll get to the Raiders in due time. We do have part 2 of the AFC West coming at you. So if you missed part 1, or if you missed the AFC East or the NFC North, go back, listen to those on your favorite podcast app. They're there for you. We're there for you. We're hoping that the NFL is here for you in the fall. And yeah, that's sort of where we're at right now. So we're going to get through this, and then we'll be back next week, I believe, with the NFC South, I think is what we planned on. All right, Shrek, you got anything before we jump right into the Los Angeles Chargers?
Let's give the people, and by the people I mean Don, what he wants, and talk Chargers football.
Yeah, I mean, I wonder how much Don loves the Chargers still with Phillip gone. It's a tough situation, and that really is the big news of the offseason, obviously, is that Phillip Rivers is gone. The Phillip era is over. I think, you can talk about, and this is not fantasy relevant at all, but you can talk about quarterbacks who, are great quarterbacks who did not win a Super Bowl. And obviously Marino is the big one with his team. And I think you can throw Romo in that conversation in terms of like all time. And I'm biased towards Romo, but all time greats who did not win a Super Bowl. Phillip not winning a Super Bowl with the Chargers, that stings. He was a great quarterback for a long time. Me and you both went through periods of like absolutely hating his guts and then kind of coming around and being like, all right, Phillip is like a funny, just like entity within the world of football.
Amen.
But yeah, he's gone, man. So I don't know. We've got Tyrod Taylor here. He's going undrafted. What do you think about TyGod leading the Los Angeles Chargers this year?
Again, as a whole, it's just going to be fucking weird, right? Like you said with Phillip Rivers, and I don't want to drone on it, but Chiefs matchups and Raiders matchups and all that stuff that historically, man, just watching them play, like as much as I hated Phillip's guts with a passion, I did. He was fun to watch, right? Whether it was the stomping of the feet, being a crybaby, but he really could make some plays. So it is going to be an adjustment to not see him out there. Again, and for those of you that did tune in to the last podcast where we talked Chiefs Broncos, and for those of you who didn't, I'll give you a little tease. I have a feeling this is one where I believe I know how Walsh feels, and I definitely don't, and he's going to tell me why I'm wrong. Because I feel Walsh 100% loves TyGod. He always has. I don't think that's a leap of faith to go anywhere with. He's undrafted. Walsh, I'm not going to touch TyGod with a 10-foot pole right now.
Yeah, I wouldn't say I love TyGod. I would say I think he's firmly in the streamer conversation with a lot of other people. I'm searching.
You're not ready to get married, but you might take him on a date.
Oh yeah, I mean, look, dude, they play the Bengals week 1, so maybe I'll draft him. But so they play the Bengals week 1. They got the Chiefs week 2. Not ideal, but like you're gonna have to chuck the ball against them probably. And then week 3 they get the Panthers, who are going to be the worst defense in the league. One would think. So maybe I do draft TyGod. Maybe I am drafting him. I'll tell you what. I'm drafting him over Drew Lock, who we discussed last podcast, just because the schedule at the start is better. So yeah, I mean, it's interesting, man. Anthony Lynn seems to have full confidence in him. There were rumors of a Kaepernick tryout this week, which could be a PR stunt. Could also be that like Kaepernick makes sense as a backup to Tyrod Taylor, which I also think is, kind of logical. And then obviously we've kind of buried the lead on their draft, but they drafted Justin Herbert with the 6th overall pick out of Oregon. Yep. Herbert is, I don't think he's that dissimilar to Tyrod Taylor. He's a big guy who can run. He's athletic. He likes throwing the ball deep, but he's not that accurate deep. And that's what you get in Tyrod Taylor. So I think any way you go with this quarterback game, you're looking at a system that Anthony Lynn is going to design specifically for a quarterback with the same attributes, whether you're using Taylor or Herbert, or in the event of, the world going nuts, Kaepernick. Sorry, we got super loud there for a second.
Nope, all good.
But yeah, it's we'll see how it goes. I think Taylor's firmly in the streaming conversation. So let's talk a little bit about his pass catchers. This was a surprising one for me. Keenan Allen, wide receiver 22, 4th pick in the 5th round. I mean, Keenan Allen was wide receiver 8 last year in points per game. He had a down stretch in weeks 4 through 9, but he was great at the beginning of the season, great at the end of it. Do you think the loss of Phillip Rivers is enough to warrant him going all the way down to the 5th round? He hasn't been this cheap ever that I can remember in his career.
It feels criminal. It's, again, like you said, historically looking at what you would have to pay to get Keenan Allen. He's going alongside Cortland Sutton, Tyler Lockett, and Cortland Sutton. We literally just talked about him. I would rather Keenan Allen than Cortland Sutton, with TyGod at the helm or whatever they decide to roll the dice on there.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting because, again, it's a huge unknown. We only really know him with Phillip Rivers as the quarterback. But Keenan Allen has been better than wide receiver 22 for literally his entire career, unless he's been injured. So, I think it makes sense to be a little bit bullish on him at that price and be a guy who maybe you should be looking at to target there. Let's talk about Mike Williams because there really are only 2 wide receivers within this team that we need to talk about. Beyond that, we have Andre Patton, and then 2 rookies, Joe Reed and KJ Hill. KJ Hill, I think, even though he's the lower guy, he was drafted in the 7th round. People talk about him as like a route runner in the ilk of Keenan Allen and Stephon Diggs, where he's just like makes guys look silly, despite not having the best athletic skills. So mildly interested in him, but I think for this season, wide receivers for the Chargers, we're talking about Allen and we're talking about Mike Williams. You gave a groan at Mike Williams, so I'm assuming you are not a fan.
I've owned Mike Williams a ton, and actually I owned him in a dynasty league where things didn't work super well for me last year. I kept Andrew Luck prior to, obviously, the news of his retirement, so that was a dead spot for me. Mike Williams I kept, and again, I don't know what I paid for him, but I would assume it was definitely more expensive than his current price tag of the 11th pick in the 12th round. And it was just after that 10 touchdown year, I was so excited, and then it was just he just shit the bed. And I don't have the confidence. Keenan Allen, I'm fine with no Phillip Rivers, rolling the dice there, but I can't do it here on Mike Williams. I watched him destroy my heart last year, and I won't do it again.
All right, here's where we differ because I am buying when there is blood in the street on Mike Williams. I cannot believe he is going this low. He was a 5th round pick last year. What's changed? I mean, quarterback has changed.
Yes.
I say that. That was a stupid thing to say.
No big deal, but go ahead.
Yeah, no, but all right. So I think for Mike Williams, quarterback change might be for the better. Phillip Rivers has been a bit of a check down artist over the past couple of years. He's thrown to Austin Ekler 108 times last year. Yes. This isn't a guy who loves Keenan Allen in the slot. This isn't a guy who loves going deep. Mike Williams last year led the league in average depth of target at 17.8 yards. That was over a full yard more than the next highest wide receiver with over 50 targets. Mike Williams also, we talk about this down year for him. He went over 1,000 yards last year. He wasn't a terrible wide receiver. It was really inconsistent, and I think a lot of it came late, which I think, again, the fact that he had like these huge rough patches in the middle of the season definitely sort of burn a specific memory into our brains. And also, you talked about that 10 touchdown year in 2018. He only had 2 last year. But where you're saying, fuck, like that really burned you. For me, that's like, well, he's going to have more than 2 this year, you know? Like if Mike –
show the tattoo,
exactly,
show it.
Exactly. Yeah. I'm going to get that tattooed on like my ass or whatever. And then never get a girl to come back to my place for a second time ever again, because the first time when I show the regression tattoo, that's the end of it. But anyway,
she's like, you're regressing back to 0, bitch.
Yeah. I just called an Uber. All right. Anyway, Mike Williams, I really think like 12th round wide receiver 56. Like we're going to talk about with the Raiders, Henry Ruggs is going 3 rounds ahead of Mike Williams. That is fucking asinine. That's insane. But Jerry Jeudy is going 4 rounds ahead of Mike Williams. Mike Williams has been a productive NFL wide receiver and is just about guaranteed. Like I would bet if Mike Williams, barring injury, scores 2 or less touchdowns this year, I will legit get the regression tattoo on my ass. Like that's how confident I am that he is going to have more than 2 touchdowns this year. So, yeah, to me, screaming value. And TyGod, who is going to be the quarterback this year, from 2015 to 2017, those were his 3 years as the starting quarterback for the Bills. He was 4th in average depth of target among quarterbacks behind only Jameis, Carson Palmer, and Cam Newton. TyGod likes throwing the ball deep. Mike Williams is a deep threat on the team. Give me it, dude. I'll take it in the 8th round. I don't care.
Oh, as I feel like this is how I usually wrap up this conversation with you after I get schooled. I reserve the right to change my mind, and I probably will, but I'll save that for a month from now when I'm on with Don and I talk intelligently about Mike Williams after sounding like an idiot here because I use your lines.
Well, Shrek, here's the thing. You're going along with the same opinion that everyone else has. I'm the one who's out on a limb here. So like it's not like you are he's going in the 12th round. He's going at the end of the 12th round. So it's not like you are wrong in any sense of the word. It's just
that I'm wrong in your mind.
Yeah, I'm just looking at different things.
I'm using the gut method, and you're using the statistical method. It's fine.
All right, let's move on to tight end, where we have Hunter Henry. Last year, he was tight end 8 in points per game. He only played 12 games, but he did get 76 targets. And I think like every other Chargers option that we've talked about, he was inconsistent, but he was still a starter. Tight end 8. He's currently going off the board at tight end 10, 7th pick in the 8th round. I think like the rest of the Chargers, this is a reflection of the loss of Phillip Rivers and the expectation there. I don't have any sort of interesting stats on how much Tyrod Taylor targets the tight end, but I mean that feels like a good value to me. I don't know about you.
I'm with you. For what we have seen out of Hunter Henry, and I'm just looking at where the next ones are going, right? Like then you got Jared Cook going 2 rounds later. And then we're down talking about Noah Fant, who we literally hit on the last podcast. Like, I think he's actually a very good value as you look at the rest of the names and where they're going off our draft boards right now. I'm totally cool with Hunter Henry there.
Yeah, it's someone going ahead of him, and I'm not saying this is wrong, but Hayden Hurst is going ahead of Hunter Henry, and Hayden Hurst we have literally never seen do anything in the NFL. And he's been in the NFL for 3+ years. So this is, I think, I didn't answer your question straightforward last podcast when you asked about early tight ends. I think Hunter Henry going as the 10th tight end might be enough reason for me to just wait on tight end this year.
There it is. The truth comes out.
All right, let's move to these to the backfield here. And I was going to say to the non-pass catchers, but the number 1 running back in the backfield had 108 targets last year. So we'll start with Austin Ekler. He was running back 6 in points per game last year. Some of that time was without Melvin Gordon in the lineup, where he was really a fantasy stud. But I think even with Melvin Gordon, he was a guy who continued to produce. A lot of that, I think there's reason to expect regression for a lot of that. His catch rate was absurdly high. He had 8 receiving touchdowns. You wouldn't think those things would stick. Tyrod Taylor doesn't throw to the running back nearly as much as Phillip Rivers does. So now Eckler's going running back 12, 5th pick in the second round. Is this good value to you? Is this scary?
I actually think it's good value. I think he should be a little bit higher. I mean, again, I get the Tyrod Taylor doesn't target as much. It's not Phillip Rivers at the helm. But I mean, I think for me last year, the production proved that he can do it. I mean, he's going literally 6 running back spots behind, obviously, where he produced last year. When I look at the rest of the board, and it's Miles Sanders, Nick Chubb, Aaron Jones on the other side of him, who you can't trust Green Bay for shit, which you guys talked about in depth. Clyde Edwards, the next running back off the board. I mean, he's definitely in the right tier, but I think he's slam dunk ahead of Jones and Clyde where he is, and I think you could make the argument to move him off the board there. I actually think he's a I don't want to call him a value, but I'm okay with the price, and I think he could move up, and I'd still be okay with him.
Yeah, I don't think you're wrong there at all. I think there's definitely reasons to be concerned, but as you kind of alluded to, there's warts on all of these guys. There's a reason to be concerned with all of these guys. Looking at it honestly, I might move Melvin Gordon up from where we were talking before. I mean, should Gordon be drafted ahead of Ekler this year, or should Ekler be ahead of Gordon?
Yikes.
I don't know the answer. I don't think there's a correct answer.
I think they're an interchangeable, just call it 17, 18, like a flip-flop based on Eckler's current ADP there.
Yeah.
I don't know. I think right now that it's a coin flip on who should be above who, because we talked about Melvin Gordon and the things we love there. There's a little bit more concern on Ekler, but goddamn, I'd be happy with either of them. Yeah,
and it's one of those two where Ekler, I mentioned before how we only need to worry about 2 wide receivers on the Chargers. And when I first looked at their depth chart, I was like, man, they didn't do shit about getting a 3rd wide receiver, and they probably needed to. But they don't, because Austin Ekler is that role. So even if we get carries out of Justin Jackson or Joshua Kelly, the rookie from UCLA, Eckler's going to catch passes. He's going to be used in the slot.
Correct.
Time will tell how much passing production Tyrod can really replicate from Phillip. But even if Ekler doesn't get 108 targets, 80-plus targets feels like a slam dunk, and 80-plus targets plus, we're looking at 150 carries. Cool.
Yeah, how could you not be pumped? With even like you said, even at the floor of those numbers, I mean, it's the production is you're getting your ROI there back without question.
He's also a baller. He's good.
He's fun to watch, man. He passes the he looks good on film test, and the stats actually support him test.
Yeah.
So nice to see one of those every once in a while. As far as Justin Jackson and Joshua Kelly, for me, I don't care about either of them.
Yeah, I mean, I might give Justin Jackson a shot. I think there was a lot of talk around the draft if Joshua Kelly is going to be the early down back or whatever for the team, but I think Justin Jackson's going to be that. Justin Jackson's been good in his career when he's played. Yeah. And all 3 of these guys are guys who can run and catch the ball out of the backfield. None of them really have crazy flaws in their game. So they're sort of interchangeable, but I don't see why we would automatically assume a 4th round pick is going to displace Justin Jackson as the early down type guy. I wouldn't be surprised if Justin Jackson leads the team in rushing touchdowns by a significant margin. Okay.
Yeah, I mean, I'm with you. I mean, especially with the rookie thing, I feel like we do this every year and it applies to, the Chiefs, it applies to Clyde Edwards. People get so freaking, they get so hyped up about, this guy's going to be so good, he's going to change the game, and, we get wrapped up in this rookie nonsense, I feel every year where people they get on the hype train of believing rookies are going to make it happen. And like, how often do we truly see the rookies, unless you're talking Zeke or Saquon, you're talking about these elite guys that actually come in and take away the show. And obviously we're talking about a fourth round pick here, but I get it.
There's enough exceptions where people can make those arguments, where they can be like, well, this guy did this. And it's like, right. But like, you're ignoring the fact that like these 5 guys didn't do jack shit, So until we see otherwise, I'm going to assume Justin Jackson is running back number 2 on this team. And I don't blame you for saying you're not interested, but like at the end of the 11th round, like, yeah, fucking sure. Like this is a team with an over under win total of 8. So an average team. If Justin Jackson can take 25 to 30% of the running back touches on this team, plus the goal line work. Sure. Fine at that price.
Cool.
All right. I guess, do you have anything else on the Chargers? I think I'm all good on them.
No, only that we demand that when Don is on his next podcast, he tells us if he likes the Chargers for the Chargers or if he only likes the Chargers for Phillip Rivers.
That's a good call.
That's a big sticking point, I think, for us.
Yeah, we definitely do need to know that. All right, cool. Well, let's take a quick break, and we will be right back with the Las Vegas Raiders.
Have you thought about trying sports betting but aren't sure how it'll go? Our friends at FanDuel are giving away a $50 sign-up bonus at letstalkfantasyfootball.com/FanDuel-sportsbook.
We are back, everybody. Thank you again for joining us for part 2 of the AFC West. And we're going to jump right into the no longer Oakland, the Las Vegas Raiders. That's going to take a little bit for me to get used to. Their stadium looks very cool and kind of like a Roomba. They are no longer. I moved 3,000 miles to be close to them, and then they immediately moved away within 7 years. I said immediately within 7 years. That's like the Hot Rod gimmick where he says like he died immediately the next day or whatever. But anyway.
Well, basically the takeaway here is that you love the Raiders and the Raiders don't love you back.
Yeah, I mean that's been the story of my life. I think every sort of weird psychological tick that I have can be sort of brought back to that point. But anyway, the Raiders last year finished 7-9, but their point differential told a very different story because they had a point differential of minus 106. For reference or perspective, that was the worst in the division by far. The Chargers had a minus 8 point differential despite being 5-11. And it's the research has shown that point differential is really a better indicator of true team talent than actual record. So that paints a not too rosy picture for the Raiders relative to expectations of, a 7-9 2019 season. And what I think can only be described as an offseason in which they improved. So, I think that sort of explains the 7.5 win total for the year. We'll see how all of that works out. But just from a top-down perspective, the Raiders got better. They were garbage in terms of having pass-catching options last year. They added a couple of rookies who can be used there. And on the defensive side in particular, I think they really, really upgraded on that side of the ball. Everything's theoretical at this point. We'll see how everyone fits into the Raiders' defensive scheme. We'll see if with the abbreviated offseason, they can put it together in time. I don't know if we've talked about it on the podcast, but one of the things I've been thinking about is how after the labor stoppage year where there was an abbreviated offseason, I think it was 2011, we saw explosions of offense and like everyone thought quarterbacks were the new thing of fantasy. And it was because defense just takes longer to put together and for everything to gel than offense does, because offense is more reliant on one player, the quarterback, than defense where you have 11 guys who all need to be doing their job at all times, right? So I'm wondering if that's a thing that's going to happen this year. that's sort of been like in the back of my brain where it's just like, maybe this is going to be an offensive explosion this year and we should just fucking forget about defense entirely, unless they're a defense that's been together for multiple years. But I think I'm also overthinking that. Anyway.
Maybe not. I think it's a good point, right? Because history tends to repeat itself, or so we're told. So I actually don't think it's something, at least it's good to have a conversation about.
Yeah, I mean, so maybe the moral of that is that maybe Oakland's defense, despite looking way better on paper, isn't going to be better this year, which is also another reason I want to not think that's going to be the case, because I want to think their defense is going to be better this year.
But Walsh, here's the good news. The offense looks better on paper, and they are going to be better. So that's a win.
There we go. So let's jump right into the quarterback position. Derek Carr is the incumbent, but they did bring in Marcus Mariota to be backup. And,
yep.
I don't think that's like any sort of sound the alarm situation, but I do think it is like kind of putting Carr on notice. I don't know. They also might use Mariota in like weird little red zone packages as like a running quarterback or something. That would be fun. But for fantasy purposes, Derek Carr is currently quarterback 20. Sorry, he's going undrafted. Last year, he was quarterback 24 in points per game. Another guy for me just firmly in that streamer pool. And like, I haven't looked at their schedule, but could be worth drafting. Do you have strong opinions on Carr?
No, just he's a QB2 for 2 QB leagues kind of deal. Otherwise, he falls in the pool with everybody else. I also have not looked at his schedule, but I still would probably look elsewhere unless it was the juiciest of matchups.
I mean, so weeks 2, 3, 4, a lot of the weeks are bad. So maybe you don't take him as your quarterback, as your only quarterback. But I think you take him to start week 1 because he plays the Panthers week 1. And we just talked about how we think that they're probably the worst defense in the league. So maybe you do take Derek Carr in your draft. You play him week 1 and then you drop him. And
offensive explosion.
Yeah, you draft him as like one of 2 guys. And then you just drop him and you ride the other guy that you drafted after that. But, that's a little in the weeds. But yeah, it's one of those where Derek Carr was quarterback 24 last year, but if you look at his weapons, they've gotten so much better. Because last year we were looking at Darren Waller, and that was about it. Tyrell Williams was on the team, but he's not a wide receiver 1. They knew that, which is why they brought in Antonio Brown, and that did not work out.
No, it did not.
So now we are looking at Tyrell Williams, still going to be a starter. But we have the 12th overall pick out of Alabama, not Jerry Jeudy, Henry Ruggs III. I mean, you saw my live reaction of just like losing my shit when this happened. I have since calmed down a little bit. I still think it was the wrong pick. But Henry Ruggs is not the worst thing that could happen. He's extremely fast. He was not productive in college. But he is a field stretcher. He is a guy who might be a bit more of a work in progress. Interestingly enough, he actually wasn't like Jerry Jeudy had more 20-plus yard catches in college than Henry Ruggs did. Henry Ruggs was better at catching the ball on short routes, on slants, on screens, and just going nuts after the catch.
Which is a good thing.
Yeah, it fits into Derek Carr a lot more than this field stretcher role than that we initially kind of thought. So I'm cautiously optimistic about Henry Ruggs because, like we said, Derek Carr, the 3rd lowest ADOT among quarterbacks last year with 200 or more attempts. So we don't expect Ruggs to be catching every deep ball in the world, but I think he can be used in other ways. Currently going as wide receiver 43 in the 9th round. I would take Mike Williams ahead of him, but I don't think he's the worst value in the world, and I would take him ahead of Jerry Jeudy.
I have no problem with any of that, Walsh. I'm right there with you. It's also, side note, and you noted at the beginning, it's weird to see the LV as the team initials next to him.
It is. I've had to get
an adjustment.
I actually I made like a spreadsheet draft tracker for myself, and I was looking at it when I was making this outline. And I was looking at it and I was like, these weren't all the Raiders draft picks. And then I realized I had half of them coded as like OAK instead of LVR. but yeah, so I had to fix that. But anyway, the rest of the wide receivers, we mentioned Tyrell Williams. He was whatever last year. He was wide receiver 53. He really fell off as the year went on. He's currently going wide receiver 68 in the 15th round. Fine, right?
Yeah, I mean, again, at that point in the draft, whatever. I mean, I'd rather throw the dart at Hunter Renfrow, but yes, either way.
I actually agree with you on Renfrow, who's going one wide receiver ahead, the 67th wide receiver with the 12th pick in the 14th. He's a guy who's going to start in the slot. He managed to get 71 targets in only 13 games last year. And I would not be surprised if we see 100, 110, maybe even 120 targets for Hunter Renfrow in this offense.
Yep. Yeah, he especially at the price that he costs, I think a great ROI. Great ROI for 2020. Yeah,
it's he's the ROI is. I mean, the investment is basically free. So it's it's one of those where he's gonna do the Jarvis Landry for the Dolphins thing, where he's gonna need 10 targets to produce. But it's possible that he gets those 10 targets any given week. I want to make the point that they also did draft Bryan Edwards in the 3rd round out of South Carolina. He is a big, fast dude who can make contested catches. I'm interested in him. I don't think this is the year, but I am very interested in Bryan Edwards going forward.
Raiders love fast, baby.
Yeah, I mean, Henry Ruggs and Bryan Edwards were both kind of throwbacks to Al Davis picks for sure. But let's move to the tight end, where Darren Waller saw 25% of the target share last year. For perspective, the next highest on the team was Tyrell Williams at 14.5%. So Darren Waller was the target for this team. He finished as tight end 5. And while I don't think he's going to get that dominant target share like he did this past year, he only scored 3 touchdowns last year. So I think he could improve in that sense. I don't know if I would take him as tight end 5 this year. 12th pick in the 5th round. I don't know if that's necessarily the best price for him because I think that's closer to his ceiling than his floor. But the tight end market is weird. I don't know. What do you think about Darren Waller?
I agree that the touchdowns could come up even if some targets and receptions fall. I think I'm going to pass on the price. I'd rather wait and pay for. We just talked about Hunter Henry at 807.
Yeah.
And not saying that would be my guy necessarily, but I'd rather pay that price than the 5th round pick? Yeah, 5th round pick for Darren Waller.
Yeah, and just in general, historically, early round tight ends or late round tight ends can pay off for you, but middle round tight ends historically have not been worth it. It's the same sort of thing as quarterbacks, where you want to go, early top to get the great ones or late to just get the best of the rest, and the middle rounds don't really do much for you in terms of separating you from the field. I feel like that's what we're getting with Darren Waller this year. It's classic Greg Olsen syndrome back in the day, where you take him in the mid 5th round and it's he's fine, but also it's I could have, taken someone later or tried to do other things. And
you're stuck in that frustrating limbo, Walsh, where it's oh, look, he got me 4.5 points again. And it's I could take the scraps off the wire and get probably 1, or I could have just drafted someone that was elite and gotten me 10 a week, and you just stay in freaking tight end purgatory all year.
Yeah, I think he's going to be a frustrating guy to own, but we'll sort of see how it all goes. Let's get to the backfield and to our good friend Josh Jacobs, who really had a great rookie year. Running back 16 in PPR points per game. The thing that held him back was he only had 27 targets in the passing game. But when he got targets, he looked good. The concern with Jacobs is that the Raiders didn't seem to want to use him in passing situations. So if they fell behind, then Jacobs was not going to get the ball as much. They would bring in Jalen Richard, who they re-signed this year specifically.
Faster.
they would bring in DeAndre Washington, who is on the Chiefs now and is really, really good, as we mentioned as I, rambled about last podcast. So with Josh Jacobs this year, who is going running back 8, 10th pick in the first round, so you are paying a premium price for Josh Jacobs. The question is he going to get used in the passing game? And we don't need him to get 90 targets, but we need him to get 45 to 50, in order for him to pay off that price. So that's the question. Is he going to get used enough in the passing game? I thought the answer was yes until they drafted Lynn Bowden Jr. in the third round. I don't know. I'm still waffling back and forth on this. Do you have any sort of strong takes on Josh Jacobs and his pass game usage?
Strong takes, no. I came into the podcast tonight thinking that I was happy with the ADP of him currently at his current price. But now as I really think about it and I look at the rest of the draft board here, like, I don't know. Like, Austin Ekler, we talked about Melvin Gordon and the targets he's going to see. Like, yeah, Josh Jacobs, like you said, is great. But if he doesn't get those targets, like, we got a big problem, especially in PPR leagues. Standard leagues doesn't matter, but PPR leagues, like, we have a major problem on our hands. Would you take Josh Jacobs or Austin Ekler?
It's a tough decision. It really is. I think I would probably lean Ekler, but I think there's a reason. So Jacobs last year in games that he started, he averaged 2.1 targets per game. And this was all just like very in the weed stuff that I went through months ago. So forgive me but in those games started by Jacobs, he got those 2.1 targets a game. If he gets that this year, then like he needs to be Derrick Henry to pay off that ADP pretty much, which I think is unlikely. That being said, in those games that he started, Jalen Richard averaged 2.6 targets per game, and DeAndre Washington averaged 1.8. So if we assume Jalen Richard continues to average his 2.6 targets a game, but Jacobs absorbs DeAndre Washington's 1.8, then all of a sudden we've got 4 targets a game for Josh Jacobs, and we're looking at about 60 targets on the season, in which case RB8, no fucking problem. Like, absolutely 100%, you've got an RB8 there. I think the issue becomes, does Richard take on more of the role? Does Rod Smith, who they signed, take any of those targets? Or, as I said, does Lynn Bowden Jr., who is sort of a gadget player, he was listed as a wide receiver in the draft, but the Raiders list him as a running back. His senior year in college, he actually played quarterback for Kentucky because all of their quarterbacks got hurt, and he became like the option quarterback type of guy. So he's clearly going to be a gadget guy. So I don't want to say he's going to eat too much into Josh Jacobs' workload, but they are listing him as a running back, which is weird to me because normally those guys get listed as wide receiver. So again, I think there's there's a range of outcomes where Josh Jacobs absolutely lives up to that ADP, but it really depends on him not necessarily taking the whole passing game for the running back room, but it hinges on him getting 50 targets this year. And does he do that? I don't know. I hope he does.
Yeah, I'm with you, Walsh. I mean, the numbers could play that way, and unfortunately, it's unless we learn something. And again, it's June, so we could learn something prior to draft day. But unless I learn something that gives me more clarity on that, I probably won't own any Josh Jacobs. We talked about how those earlier picks. When we talked about Clyde Edwards right back on the Chiefs, how I can't roll the dice on a guy in the early rounds that could end up screwing me. But again, Josh Jacobs is going to perform well. It's just, is he going to return his ADP? And I don't know that he does at that price if we don't get some clarity on it. I would probably roll with some of the other guys.
Yeah, to me, looking at the running back list, and things can change because Dalvin Cook is holding out and whatever else. But the running back 7 right now is Joe Mixon. And I think there is a very clear dichotomy between Joe Mixon is a guy who you spend a first-round pick on, and I do not know that Josh Jacobs is next. And the guys afterwards, the Kenyon Drakes, the Nick Chubbs, the Miles Sanders, the Austin Eklers, I think they all have enough weird concerns where, to me, and I'll just go through the list, McCaffrey, Barkley, Elliott, Kamara, Cook, Henry, Mixon, those are first-round picks. And I'm not sure any of the guys after that are first-round picks.
Totally fair. Totally fair.
All right. I think that pretty much does it for the Raiders, which means I think we've gotten through the entire AFC West. Yeah. Do you have anything else for the people, Shrek?
No, nothing new for the people, guys. But as Walsh has harped on and everything else, mask up, glove up, stay healthy, and let's keep football on track for 2020, because if we put all this time into the podcast just to listen to ourselves play it back, we're not going to be super pumped.
No, absolutely not. And, we love football, and we love all of our listeners, and we love everyone, even if you aren't our listener, but we love our listeners a little bit more than the people who are not listeners. So, if you're listening to this, please stay healthy. Please put on your masks. Please be careful in public. It's a matter of caring for your fellow people. So do all those things, and hopefully, we can get through football season together. We can help you guys win your fantasy leagues. We can all make a bunch of money on DFS, and we'll all be a big, happy Let's Talk Fantasy Football family.
Love it.
Yeah, I guess with that being said, we'll catch you guys next week. We've got the NFC South coming up, a very, very fun division that I am excited to talk about. I recently bet the Saints to win the Super Bowl, so I'll certainly throw a bunch of information on that going forward. But yeah, we'll catch you guys on the next one. Make sure you listen to the previous ones if you haven't. But for Shrek, I am Walsh. We are Let's Talk Fantasy Football. Later, podcast.
This has been Let's Talk Fantasy Football. Thanks for listening.